Hi everyone, I'm Dina with Mills Family Gardening. We live in North Texas, Zone 8A. And in this video, we'll be talking about growing tomatoes with multiple stems. A few years ago, I jumped on a trend wagon and I started pruning my tomatoes to keeping only one stem. That's what a lot of YouTube gardeners were promoting, and I thought I would try it out. At first, it worked okay. I did grow quite a few tomatoes with just a single stem, but then as the years went by and that whole area where we grew tomatoes started getting shadier and they grew in clay soil, our tomatoes did not do well at all. They hardly produced any fruit, and actually last summer I did not harvest any large tomatoes because they did not do well with a single stem at all, and also because we have so much shade in that area of our garden, they hardly grew any flowers. Now cherry tomatoes and small varieties of tomatoes did much better because cherry tomatoes do much better in shade in general. They can produce a lot of flowers, a lot of fruit in the shade, so we harvested a lot of sun gold tomatoes, but we did not have any large fruited tomatoes. This year I decided to ditch any single stem tomato method, and I decided to keep all the stems, all the side shoots in our tomatoes, and let's see how they're doing. These are our tomatoes. They're growing in a pretty small area. The raised bed is about 4 by 12 feet, and we have about 24 plants here, and you can see they all are doing so well. They all are green, lush, and they're also loaded with fruit and flowers. Now it's getting too hot right now. Today is supposed to be in the 90s, and I think today they're going to take a break, but after today we're supposed to go down into the 70 degrees Fahrenheit, so tomatoes will start producing fruit again. So this year I'm keeping all side shoots and branches on our tomatoes. Our growing season here in North Texas is so short that we have only this period of time until the end of May while tomatoes are still producing fruit, and so we need to take advantage of that short time, and we need to let our tomatoes grow as many side shoots and flowers as they possibly can. If we compare the tomatoes that we're growing this year with multiple stems to the tomatoes that we grew last year with a single stem, I can surely say that this year our tomatoes are doing so much better. They're loaded with flowers and fruit, and I'm seeing so many more tomatoes this year than we had last year. Some people say that if you have multiple branches on one tomato plant, then it will be losing its energy and strength to produce more fruit, but this is not the case. I'm seeing that every single tomato plant that has multiple branches is loaded with flowers and loaded with fruit. So that single stem tomato theory cannot be applied to our climate. Every climate is different, so experiment with your garden, with your temperatures, and see what works best for you. The only time I pruned these tomatoes was when I planted them first in the ground, and I removed the lower leaves so they would not be touching the ground. Other than that, I have not touched my tomatoes with pruners, and they're doing great. Some tomatoes do get yellow leaves, but I'm not worried about it because our growing season here is so short until the heat sets in that by the time July rolls in, they'll be all dead. I noticed that a few tomatoes got damaged by tomato worms, and I'm not worried about it because a lot of them are still loaded with flowers, but I am going to remove this tomato worm and dispose of it. It's up to you what you would like to do. Some people grow tomatoes specifically for these tomato worms and then relocate them to those special tomatoes, and then they leave the rest of the tomatoes alone. If you don't want to have a tomato worm problem, you can use sprays like spinosad or BT. They will successfully get your tomatoes rid of those worms. To grow multi-stem tomatoes successfully, they require 4 factors. The very first one is full sun. Tomatoes produce a lot of flowers and hence a lot of fruit if they grow in full sun. If they grow in shady areas that get shade most of the day and about 2 or 3 hours of sun, then they're not going to grow enough flowers or produce fruit. The second factor is tomatoes need well-draining and fluffy soil. If they grow in compacted, clay, hard as rock soil, they're going to grow very slowly, produce very few flowers and fruit. So if you want your tomatoes to produce a lot of flowers and fruit, then make sure to provide them with well-draining and loose soil. The third factor is tomatoes require regular and consistent watering. If you water them once a week and you live in a dry climate, the tomatoes are not going to do well. They're going to suffer, they're going to be stressed and not produce any fruit. Especially in our climate where our summers can get really hot, it can stay in the high 90s or even 100 degrees Fahrenheit for months, we need to make sure to water our tomatoes possibly daily if we don't mulch our beds real well. Now, if we do apply a thick layer of mulch, we can get away with watering our tomatoes once every few days. If you live in a cooler climate, you can water them even less. But make sure to water them consistently and regularly, because if you skip a few days and tomatoes get dry and then you give them a lot of water again, the fruit might crack and it will affect the growth of your tomato plants in general. Inconsistent watering also leads to the problem that's called blossom end rot, so to avoid it, we need to make sure to water our tomatoes regularly. And the fourth factor is tomatoes require a lot of fertilizer. If you want your tomatoes to have thick, dark green, healthy stems and also produce a lot of flowers and good sized fruit, they need to be fertilized regularly. For that, you can use organic all-purpose fertilizer or non-organic all-purpose fertilizer. If you notice your tomatoes are getting light green leaves, that means they're not getting enough nitrogen, and for that you can give them blood meal. You can also use liquid fertilizers like fish fertilizer and more bloom. Combined, they make more of an all-purpose liquid fertilizer, and you can use that for your tomatoes. Is it possible to grow successful tomatoes with a single branch method? Yes, it's very possible. For that, you need to provide your tomatoes with close to ideal conditions, and those conditions can be created in a greenhouse where the temperatures are steady day and night, where the humidity level is the same at all times, where there's no pouring rain, where humidity does not get to 100%, where the flowers lose their ability to get pollinated and set fruit. And also, those near ideal conditions can be achieved in cooler climates where summer temperatures stay mostly mild. It can stay in the low 80s or high 80s throughout the summer. Sometimes it can get to 90 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, but it does not stay that hot for a long time. So in those conditions, it is possible to grow tomatoes successfully with a single branch method. In most parts of the world, including our North Texas climate, it's very difficult to achieve those perfect conditions. That's why we need to use the spring season here in North Texas to the fullest. It gets so hot here by the end of May, beginning of June, that our tomato plants stop setting any fruit, and it stays like that till late September when the temperatures finally cool down and tomatoes can set fruit again. That's why during that short period of time in the spring and in the fall, we need to let our tomatoes grow as many branches, as many side shoots as they possibly can, so they can set as many flowers and fruit. I'm so impressed the way our tomatoes are doing this year that I'm going to keep multi-stem tomatoes every year from now on. And I highly recommend it to all of y'all gardeners. I hope you like this video, and I hope it's going to help you grow better tomatoes. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.